Good evening. Good evening, Mrs. Bethune.
Good evening, Mr. Edwards.
Now, they say Bethune, don't they?
They do, Mr. Edwards.
Some say, I've heard it said Bethune, but you say Bethune. Do you mind if we look back through the 74 years of your life tonight?
I shall be happy to have you so do.
Oh, I'm glad you don't mind, because this is the story of a great dream and the people who helped to change it to reality. This is the story of Mary McLeod Bethune and her dream that became a reality.
Oh, freedom! Oh, freedom! Oh, freedom after a while.
It's July 10th, 1875, in the home of Samuel and Patsy McIntosh McLeod in the town of Maysville, South Carolina. Samuel and Patsy McLeod have been slaves up until the Emancipation Proclamation. When they were freed, they remained, working for their former owners until they had earned enough to buy 5 acres of land, and then they built their own cabin. Yes, it's July 10th, 1875, and why is that an important date to you, Mrs. Bethune?
Because it is the date in which I was born.
That's right. And how many children were there in your family?
There were 17 of us.
And you were the 15th of those 17 children.
I was the 15th.
This old hammer killed John Henry. This old hammer killed John Henry.
1880, 81, 82, 83, 1884. These aren't easy years, are they? Mary McLeod, we say, in 1884. 17 children in the family, and they all worked in the rice and cotton fields. You were 9 years old in 1884. How much cotton were you able to pick in a day, Mrs. Bethune?
I used to pick 200 pounds of cotton per day.
A 9-year-old girl picks 200 pounds of cotton a day, but she wants to be able to read and write, and she can't because in those days it was practically impossible for a child of her race to get an education.
We'll walk in the light, beautiful light, from where the dewdrops of mercy shine bright.
But she was acquainted with the Bible because her parents are deeply religious, and as the family sits around the fireside, they tell the children stories from the good book and sing the songs that grew from their hearts. You're a good child, Mary McLeod. Your parents have a pet name for you. What is it they call you back here now?
They called me Mame.
And what was the other name that they called you that exemplified the comfort that you brought to the home?
They called me their blessed child.
And comfort and joy.
Their comfort and their joy.
Yes, and you deserve that name. You are a comfort and joy to your family. 1885, 1886. 1886.
School days, school days.
1886 is a red-letter year for a little girl who so wants to know how to read and write. For a free school is started by Emma Wilson, a Negro missionary sent by the Presbyterian Church. How far did you have to walk each way to school, Miss Bethune?
I walked 5 miles every morning, 5 miles every evening.
10-mile round trip. And what did you do in the evenings after school?
Oh, I did the chores, helped to get in the lightwood to make the fires.
What about
clean
you?
the cows.
What about what you had learned in school?
And then I would gather the children of the plantation in and give to them and to my older brothers and sisters what I had learned that day myself in school.
No wonder they called you Comfort and Joy. 1887, 88, 89, 1890. 1890, you're 15, Mary McLeod. The hopes you've been nursing that you might go to a higher school are crushed by what is a major calamity to a small farmer such as your father. Can you think what that is, your farmer father? What happened that was a calamity back there in 1890?
My father lost his mule.
Yes, seems like a small thing, a mule's dying, but what did it mean to your father?
It meant that he had to mortgage his entire little farm to get another.
And then something happened, something wonderful. Far, far away in Denver, Colorado, a dressmaker, not of your race, but very much interested in the Maysville Mission School you had attended, offers to pay for the further education of some worthy student. And you are chosen. Who was that dressmaker, Miss Bethune?
That dressmaker was Miss Mary Chrisman of South Denver, Colorado.
A wonderful, grand person, wasn't she?
Yes, she heard of us, and she wrote to our teacher, and she said, if you can find a little girl in the community that you think will make good, out of the money that I'm earning, I will give for her education.
Oh, bless her heart. And so in 1891, being 16 years old, you go to Scotia Seminary in Concord, North Carolina, near Charlotte. Isn't that right?
That is true.
Yes, indeed. I wonder who was back there in that
That
day.
was the first time, you know, that I had ever ridden on a train. I'd never been on a train before.
First time you'd been upstairs, too, wasn't
First time I'd ever gone upstairs.
Well, how did you
Up at the
feel when you
Scotia.
first went up to the second floor?
Oh, it was so queer and strange.
Is that so? Well, what about, I wonder who was back here in Nova Scotia Seminary. Scotia Seminary in Concord, North Carolina, near Charlotte. I think they had a nickname for you at Scotia.
Yes, Mr. Edwards. Our nickname for Mary was Dick.
Oh, so the girl's nickname for you was Dick, eh? Who said that back of the archway? Why did you call her that?
We nicknamed Mary Dick because she was fearless, had a heavy voice, and was a leader of our entire school.
Can you guess who that is? Well, now, wait a minute. Come through the Philip Morris Archway, a classmate of yours, Mrs. Bethune, at Scotia Seminary 58 years ago. Mrs. Cecilia Smith of Washington, D.C.
Hello,
Mrs. Smith, wonderful to
How did you do that?
We came by plane to surprise you.
Yes?
NBC gave us a trip.
Yes,
Oh,
indeed.
wonderful.
Some by train, some by plane. Mrs. Smith, what did you think of Mary McLeod when you first met her at school here in 1891?
Well, you know how girls are. Although Mary's clothes were clean and neat, they weren't quite as up to date as the other girls. And I wasn't too impressed by her at first. But finally, she won us all over by her leadership and friendly disposition.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Will you please take a seat over there with Mrs. Bethune's pass? 1893, you graduate from Scotia and you accept a scholarship to the Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. And while you're at the Moody Bible Institute, a dream is born and a dedication is made. A dream in which you will be a wellspring from which education will flow to your people, and a dedication of yourself to making that dream a reality. Approached with the same courage and determination that helped you to pick 200 pounds of cotton a day when you were 9 years old, walk 5 miles each way to school, and win through to an education for yourself through almost insurmountable difficulties. That dream must come true. 1895, 96, 97, 99. March 1899, you marry a fellow teacher, Albertus Bethune, in Sumter, South Carolina. A year later, when you move to Savannah, Georgia, a son is born, Albert Bethune, named after your husband, of course. Where's your son now, Miss Bethune?
My son is an undertaker in Daytona Beach, Florida.
Mm-hmm. And where is he now?
He's in Daytona Beach, Florida.
I see.
No, I'm not, Mother. I'm right here.
What's going on here? My, oh my. Yes, son Hello, Albert. Son Albert, flown here by TWA, Transworld Airlines Constellation, to take his proud part in the life of his mother tonight. How is everything, Mr. Bethune?
Everything's all right at the college, Mr. Edwards, when we left.
Good. Besides being in the undertaking business, you're also at college. Is that right?
I'm in charge of vocational shops at Bethune-Cookman College at Daytona Beach, Florida.
Yes. Now, hold on, though. This is 1899, and there isn't any Bethune-Cookman College yet. And even if there were, they wouldn't have an infant like you in charge of anything. You've just been born. All right, here we go. 1900. Mrs. Bethune, how are you doing? All right?
Wonderful.
You're teaching at Palatka, Florida.
A little mission school there.
And you're not only teaching, you're doing some other work as
I'm
well.
doing insurance work on the side. Try to raise a
And
little
prison
fund to
work,
help.
too, talking with
I'm
the
talking
prisoners.
to the prisoners.
And while
twice
you and your
every week.
husband were busy teaching, somebody had to help take care of little Albert Bethune. Who did that?
I helped out, Mr. Edwards.
Well, who's that back there?
A pupil of Mrs. Bethune's at Palatka 48 years ago.
Well, can you think who it might be, Mrs. Bethune? It's Mr. Leroy Bazell of Daytona
Bazell!
Beach, Florida. Yes,
How do you do, Mrs. Bethune? Glad to see you.
yes, indeed. Oh, well, what do you do now, Mr. Bazell?
I operate a newsstand in Daytona Beach, Florida, a very large stand.
One of the largest there, yes.
Yes, sir.
It's known as Leroy's,
Leroy's
stand.
newsstand.
Well, what else about it?
Well,
I mean about you and Albert in the early life.
each morning, his mother would
Mrs. Bethune would stop at the home of my mother, Mrs. C.I. Basil, who is now 92, listening in Philadelphia tonight.
Oh, wonderful.
Then later on, I'd just sing him to sleep or rock him to sleep. Of course, sometimes I felt like paddling him when he was naughty.
Well, Leroy Basil, you just take your place over there with little Albert and restrain yourself. 1904, you go to Daytona Beach, Florida, where your real life's work is to start. That day in Daytona Beach, when you decided to start a girls' school of your own, how much money did you have?
I had $1.50 in cash, but I had faith in God.
Bless your heart. And a
I
dream.
believed in my people, and I had confidence in Mary McLeod Bethune.
And your confidence was borne out. You rent a house here. You get
I
dry
had a
goods
little
boxes
rented
for
house.
check.
I
Tell us
couldn't
about
pay
that school.
I
I'd
couldn't
like to
pay the
know.
rent for it.
Yes, my dear.
The man charged me
What was your
$11
desk?
a month.
What was your desk made
My
out of?
desk was made of dry goods boxes, and I took an old barrel and turned it upside down, put cretonne around it for my desk, and took the dry goods boxes and made benches and stools for my little girl.
Using all your resourcefulness, you made that cottage clean and livable. And on October 3rd, 1904, with 5 little girls and your son as pupils, you opened the first session of the Daytona Educational and Industrial Training School for Negro girls, with everyone joining together singing a hymn.
What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arm.
Was that the hymn? I wonder what your pupils thought about at that school opening.
We were all very much thrilled by it, Mr. Edwards. I know. I was one of the original 5 students.
This is your life, Mrs. Bethune, and here is Mrs. Gertrude Jackson of New York City, who was one of those 5 little girl pupils present when your school opened.
Am I late, teacher?
Oh, my goodness. Mrs. Jackson, what are some of the memories you have about that first school of Mrs. Bethune?
Well, I remember we used to use charcoal for pencils and crushed elderberries to make our ink.
Yes?
Yes, and Mother taught manual training, and we used to repair the junk pile furniture so we'd have something to sit on.
That's Albert Bethune speaking. Was there any tuition, Mrs. Jackson?
Yes, we paid 50 cents a week.
And there were other ways you raised money for a school that started on $1.50, Mrs. Bethune, such as having your students sing spirituals at various functions.
Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh.
As the months go on, you acquire more and more pupils, but the sailing isn't too smooth, is it?
It's awfully hard.
Do you remember one Saturday night in 1905, you found yourself without funds and the larder completely empty? You had your pupils to feed. Many of them ate at the school, and you walked into a grocery store where you'd been paying cash and asked for credit, and what happened then?
He told me he could not credit me until I could pay what I owed.
And as you walked toward your school, you kept thinking of those hungry children. You passed the home of a man who had visited your school a number of times, and you went in to see him. Isn't that right? You wanted to tell him...
His name was Mr. Doan. I remember him.
Yes? You wanted to tell him of your distress, but somehow you just couldn't. But as you said goodbye, what happened?
He came to the door and bade me good night and put a $20 bill in my hand.
Yes. Do you remember who that gentleman was?
Mr. Doan, George S. Doan. He formerly lived in Springfield, Massachusetts.
Wonderful. And so your children were fed. 1906, 1907. 1907, you now have 250 pupils, 250, and the dream is starting to shape into reality because it's 1907, through money raised by singing, selling ice cream and sweet potato pie to road construction gangs. I'd like to have tasted some of that. That must have been good, Miss Bethune. And the contributions of such people as Mr. Doan and Mr. Gamble of Procter & Gamble, Mr. R.E. Olds, the automobile manufacturer, and Mr. Thomas H. White of the White Motor Trucks and Sewing Machine Company, and others. You buy an old dumping ground, reclaim 32 acres of it, and build a 4-story frame building to house your school. You call the building Faith Hall.
Faith Hall. But you know, I paid only $5 down at my first payment. That's all I had.
I think that's wonderful. I wish you were in business with me. And you used to bring groups of visitors around regularly to see the school and the youngsters, people who might help out with sorely needed funds.
Yes, she certainly did, Mr. Edwards.
Now, who's that?
Miss Sadie Mills Franklin, a pupil in Miss Bethune's school in the frame building, Faith Hall.
Well, come out here.
Hello, Miss Bethune.
Yes, Mrs. Franklin here. She is Sadie Franklin, a pupil of Mrs. Bethune's from way back in Faith Hall. What do you do now in this year, 1949, Mrs. Franklin?
I'm now the executive housekeeper of Freedman's Hospital, Washington, D.C.
Yes, but as part of Mrs. Bethune's past, you said that she used to bring groups of visitors around to the school.
Yes, naturally, she wanted to show off the school and the pupils. Well, I can remember that several other little girls and myself had been playing up in the attic. And just as was climbing down the ladder, and as Miss Bethune brought around a group of visitors who were standing at the bottom of the ladder when we were coming down, I'm afraid our appearance didn't pass inspection.
Oh, sweet Jerry-O.
It's 1919, Mrs. Bethune, and tragedy comes to you. Your beloved husband and helpmate, Albertus Bethune, passes away. But you take your bright courage in your two hands, and in 1922, Curtis Hall is erected as part of your school to instill into the hearts of your girls, you say, a reverence for the home beautiful.
And may I tell you that the first shovel load that was
dirt,
dug
yes.
out, I dug it, and the second for that dormitory
Isn't that wonderful?
was Mrs. Lawrence from Bronxville, New York.
Wonderful. Comfort and Joy, they called her when she was a child, remember? 1923. In July 1923, your school, Mrs. Bethune, the Daytona Normal and Industrial Institute, merged with the Cookman Institute, an old established college, for the purpose of enlarging the opportunities for Negro education in Florida. And you become first president of Bethune-Cookman College, a coeducational institution. And the dream is now a reality.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah.
Yes, and through you, education flows to your people as Bethune-Cookman College becomes a progressive institution with 600 students, a staff of 32 with 14 modern buildings, a campus of 32 acres, a total college property worth, approximately $800,000 unencumbered by mortgages. And you started your school with $1.50.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. There's golden marching on.
How many people does it take to make a dream come true, Mary McLeod Bethune? For an educator, it takes these people, the people who inspired her, who gave her material and spiritual assistance, her associates, her teachers, her child, her pupils, like these former students of yours, coming out now. Mrs. Lucy Mitchell, now of Roxbury, Massachusetts.
Hello, Mrs. Mitchell.
Oh, yes, indeed. Well, and what do you do now, Mrs. Mitchell?
I'm director of the nursery school at the Robert Gould Shaw Settlement House in Boston, Massachusetts.
And Charlotte Ford Clark.
Hello, Peter.
How does it seem to see all these people out of the old school days, Miss Bethune? What are you doing now, Miss Clark, by the way?
I'm Dean of Instruction at Bethune-Cookman College.
Yes, these are just two of many of your former pupils who have distinguished themselves and gladdened the heart of their beloved teacher. Time goes on and honors are heaped upon you, Mary McLeod Bethune, since 1924 when Bethune-Cookman College was founded. 1931, famous author Ida Tarbell lists your name as being one of America's 50 most illustrious women. 1935, you're awarded the Spingarn Medal by the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People as being the person who for that year had contributed most to the benefit of the Negro. You form and become president of the National Council of Negro Women. 1936, you were appointed by President Roosevelt to be director of the Division of Negro Affairs of the National Youth Administration. You also become the president's special advisor on minority problems. You had quite a few important and difficult decisions to make in these positions, Mrs. Bethune. I wonder if your deep religious training ever helped you in that.
They have been my undergirding.
Yes? What? But there were two voices. What did I hear from the past?
I can vouch that it did, Mr. Edwards.
And who are you?
Ms. Bethune's secretary for 15 years.
Miss Arabella Deniston, another graduate of your Bethune-Cookman College, your secretary. Oh, my. You say, Miss Deniston, that Mrs. Bethune's religious training did help her?
Yes, she often prays before making difficult decisions.
Yes.
I remember back in 1937, she had a very difficult decision to make. We lived together, and on one night after she had retired, she arose about midnight and got beside her bed to say her prayers for guidance. That was at 2:30 in the morning when she called me in the middle of my very best sleep. She said, "Arabella, take a letter." Then she dictated the decision she'd made. Even to this day, she reads every morning from a prayer book given her by the late John D. Rockefeller.
In 1942, you retire as president of Bethune-Cookman College, Mrs. Bethune, and you're appointed as special assistant to the Secretary of War for selection of candidates for the First Officers Candidate School of the WACs. All in all, you worked for President Roosevelt's administration from 36 to 44, isn't that right?
Yes.
Did you see much of the president?
I saw him very often, possibly 6 or 7, 8 or 9 times per month. He would send for me.
What about the gift that came to you at his passing?
Oh, when he went away, Mrs. Roosevelt, 1 month after his death, sent me his favorite walking cane because I liked to swagger a cane, and the president knew it.
A great treasure from a great friend. 1945, Mrs. Bethune, you're appointed by President Truman as consultant to the Conference of the United Nations at San Francisco. Among the delegates to the United Nations from the United States is your great and good friend, Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt. Busy on an important lecture tour, Mrs. Roosevelt is unable to take her place here in person tonight. Nevertheless, she sends you this transcribed message.
I can't help thinking, Mrs. Bethune, how very right your parents were in calling you Comfort and Joy. I wonder if those dear people really knew to what heights this comfort and joy would go. Certainly your courage and devotion and desire for a better world has been an inspiration not only to people of your race, but to the world at large. This is your life, Mrs. Bethune, and I am happy to be a part of it.
Roosevelt, this was the girl, Mary McLeod Bethune, who was born of slave parents, the girl who picked 200 pounds of cotton a day when she was 9 years old and who could neither read nor write until she was 11. Thank you, Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt, for adding your heartfelt message. A great lady pays her respects to a great lady. A half hour is not time enough to tell all of your accomplishments, Mary McLeod Bethune, the many awards, the degrees, and honors that have been given you in every section of the country. You've won the Thomas Jefferson Medal offered by the Southern Women, and on February 21st, 1949, you were given an honorary degree by Rollins College, Florida. This has been the courageous past and illustrious present. Now, what of the future? Well, Mrs. Bethune, you've often said you have 2 children, your own son, Albert, and Bethune-Cookman College, isn't that right?
You're right.
Well, we know that the students who attend Bethune-Cookman don't have too much of the world's goods. Your college was founded to help just such men and women. And Philip Morris would like in a small way to help them, too. We have heard that the college needs a motion picture projector and screen for use in the classrooms and the recreation hall. So here is a 16-millimeter sound and silent Victor animatograph moving picture projector and radiant screen. Now, sometimes a student needs $10 or $15 or $25 for board or books, and those few dollars look mighty big to him when he doesn't have them. Now, isn't that true?
That's true.
So in your honor, Philip Morris would like to suggest to the many listeners tonight who have been inspired and moved by your courageous, unselfish efforts to bring education to your people, we would like to suggest to everyone that your work, Mrs. Bethune, can be given the future it needs by everyone sending a donation in your name to Bethune-Cookman College, to Mrs. Bethune, Daytona Beach, Florida. The address, Mrs. Bethune, Daytona Beach, Florida. Now, I know this comes as a surprise to you, Mrs. Bethune, but perhaps from the great hearts of our listeners will come some of the necessary funds you have prayed for to help you build the gymnasium and the house of worship that you would make that would make that childhood dream of yours complete. I think you want an economic hall, too, there.
Yes, we want an economic hall. We want a gymnasium. We need a girls' dormitory.
Bless your heart.
House of worship.
I am truly...
And then we have just launching a campaign for $1 million endowment to make permanent the work of my life.
Maybe our listeners will help you, Mrs. Bethune, and fulfill your greatest wish now, the statement you have recently made, your greatest dream, that all the work in stone and mortar that has gone into the college may survive long after you are gone. Mrs. Bethune, Daytona Beach, Florida, I hope your contributions are large. And for you personally, we have here, Philip Morris has an appropriately engraved diamond Bulova wristwatch. Thank you. This is your life, Mary McLeod Bethune, born of Maysville, South Carolina, and found fulfillment in almost every part of the world. Good night, Miss Bethune. Good night, and God bless you. Good night.
Tonight, This Is Your Life came from Hollywood. This is Art Ballinger saying good night for Philip Morris.